I mean, it's great to see you guys, man. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It's like, once it got set up, I was like, oh yeah, why haven't I talked to these guys already? Like, we could have done this a while ago.
Forgot about us, Willy. Can't forget your roots.
You know, man, what's funny though, and I mean this legitimately, is we haven't talked in a super long time, but I've always felt, I think there's something to like the fact that we were all just there in Chicago when we were all kids figuring it out and starting up what was going to become all these projects. Like, in a way, I feel it's weird because I can go 10 years without seeing you guys, and now I see you, and it doesn't really feel like, I just feel like, oh, it's my buddies from Chicago. Like, it doesn't really seem like time has passed, you know?
Going back to fly-by-night, 18-plus parties.
Dude, securing that 18-plus was a big moment for us.
I remember those.
I was trying to remember, what was your guys' party that had the mug shots kind of promo pictures?
Disappear Here.
Here. God.
That was that Pete Wentz's bar.
Yeah, Angels and Kings, where I used to have a little residency there too, like post. Well, I guess Fly By Night was still going, but I was doing like some of their more mainstream nights. That was a good little spot.
Yeah.
They were all good spots. I get so nostalgic when I go back to Chicago and just like walk around. I just remember one day, it was right after quarantine where, we've been sitting at home for a whole year. And I think one of my first trips, actually my first trip after quarantine, was to Chicago to play this park and rave.
Oh, yeah.
And then we did like a deep house yoga on the Chicago River. But I remember that week, I was just like walking around that whole area around House of Blues and everything. And I was just getting super nostalgic, all the parties we used to throw there. And then the first like Autograf show we did was at House of Blues. And I just felt like I just walking down memory lane. It's like nice. Now I get how like old people feel. Like 80 years old, like start talking about like their glory days in high school playing football or something. That was me right
there. Dude, it's true. Like, it is funny. I think about this all the time, and I talk about this on the podcast a lot, but for you guys, let me ask you, like, reflecting back, because you've been in the game, as long as I've been in the game, like, we've been doing this for a while now. Does it feel different at this point? Like, has something fundamentally changed in the way you look at what you're doing? Because in a lot of ways, I still feel very much like the same stupid kid who was there at the beginning. You know what I mean?
I feel like I'm reminded by that when I hang out with adults.
Well, okay, so you're not even referring to yourself as an adult. Like, this is what I mean. Like, you are an adult, It's
more when I hang out with people that have like a structured like 9-to-5 life.
Yeah.
Then I haven't really had that in a long time. So I just feel like I don't have to have much of a filter. And I realize like corporate world, you have like a huge amount of filter, what you can and can't say, and just goofing off and being silly and stupid.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, I guess, a nice way to look at it, because you think about kids when they're little, and, kids are always like, they're so creative and they'll say anything. And you're always kind of marveling at like where kids come up with this shit. And maybe that's the same thing for what we do, is like, it's nice what you're talking about. It's like, let's stay in that place. And maybe we've been lucky in the fact that we've avoided some of these environments where, you kind of have to conform a little bit just out of necessity, and I'm not even like shit talking other kinds of jobs or other things people do, but it's, each side has its pluses and minuses, and maybe that's one of our pluses.
Yeah, approaching anything with playfulness, is a big part of what we do. And, I think it builds for a cool culture around music and the entertainment industry.
Are you guys still...
super pure.
Wait, what did you say, Lewis?
So I was in Denver this past week, and I went to Meow Wolf, and I ate some mushrooms while I was there, which I don't do very often. And I was just like, have you ever been to Meow Wolf? It's like this crazy.
Yeah, you know
trippy-
what? I've never actually been, but I know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, just really observing this one weird sculpture. And then this little boy comes up to us. It's probably like 6 years old. Then he starts talking about like how like the aliens are coming in the parallel universe and this alternate reality. And I was like really intrigued by what he was saying. But then all of a sudden his mom comes and like squelches it down. And she says, "Oh, don't worry about him. Just like, come on, we got to get out of here. Stop talking like that." And I just feel like kids have like such a pure creativity that, sometimes we do lose touch with it a lot. But in that state where I was like on mushrooms, I was just like, wow, that's the way he's thinking is very refreshing.
Dude, it's incredible that just coincidentally, while you took mushrooms, a kid started talking to you about aliens and like very psychedelic concepts. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I feel like as adults, we have to take drugs a lot of times to come back to that childlike state or that animalistic state. And that kind of says a lot, right?
Yeah. I mean, are there other ways you've found to try to get back to that? Because Michael, what you said about staying playful also really resonated to me. Like, I feel like it's an interesting, like, kind of one thing rises and I have to sort of adjust and rebalance myself. So it's like, as I got older, I got more anxious. But then because I noticed myself getting more anxious, I got sillier, and that kind of like started to balance it out into, like not taking yourself as seriously. And it is I was just listening to a podcast of how somebody talking about how you kind of like you and your body, it's like a car, and the car after a while, like you got to tune it up. Sometimes it like leans to the right and you got to correct the axle, all that kind of thing. And I don't know, you were just making me think of that.
Yeah, I get it a lot. I think from like my fiance really she's a yoga teacher and stuff. And like, she's always talking about how you need to be more playful and this and that in life. And it really resonates well with me when I'm put in those positions to be like that. I feel like in a safe space to be that way and not being judged.
Well, and you guys, to bring it back to Autograf too, I mean, one thing I've always loved about what you guys do is that you build shit. And it's sort of this interesting dimension that a lot of projects in sort of the DJ world don't have, where I don't know if I'd call it theatrical or just, DIY or something. But the fact that there's objects that you guys have built, these unique things that you're presenting to people, I don't know. Do you think that plays into sort of that playful thing, that connecting to your childlike energy, that purity, whatever you want to call it? Because for me, it does kind of take my brain to that place when I see you guys doing that.
I haven't even thought about it that way, really, because I think a lot of it was just out of necessity. We want to do these cool things, and the only way to do it was for us to do it ourselves in the beginning. But it does unlock a different side of creativity to do it yourself and not just have like a team or a lot of times with DJs, even they just go and play a club and plug in a USB stick and don't even think about that side of things. So yeah, it's not something I've really ever actively thought about, but definitely.
Are you guys how much are you still doing in like 2023? Are you still building like elaborate stage sets and all that? I haven't seen you guys play in a while.
On this particular tour, no, because it's like kind of more of a club tour with this emphasis on like these 360 sets. But I mean, we just did this really cool label release party, our album release party up in the hills with Geo Jam at their big mansion. And again, being there, just setting up the DJ booth, we wanted like a certain vibe to it, setting up like neon signs and lights and just all that stuff still.
That's great, man.
Yeah. Our last tour last year, we did a live tour, like a hybrid live tour. And for those type of tours, we will conceptualize and build the stage. And that concept was just a bohemian vibe. Essentially just transporting my apartment and bringing it on the road on stage. Right. Having a bunch of plants and like wood elements, natural earth tones, and like 20 salt lamps and just and some incense. So it was such a vibe, actually, now that I'm thinking back to it. Like we'd walk in, like people smell the incense, just a nice orange glow to all the salt lamps. And like the intro song was like rainfall, jungle noises, and then slowly a piano came in. And so yeah, it's kind of fun when you are conceptualizing a tour every time and you come up with something different and new, and you kind of had to figure out how to build it. Like in this case, we just took a bunch of plant stands and turned those into like our music stations.
Okay. Yeah, all of that. That's just fun, man. That's like, I don't know. I think sometimes you do this long enough, or maybe for some people just starting out who just see like dance music in the States is so much bigger now than when we started, right? And I think for a kid coming into it, there's so much more. You can just hop on Instagram, whatever, and you see exactly what everyone is doing, and you kind of get in your head. It's like, oh, this is just what this looks like. This is how this should be presented. And I think a lot of people don't even think about some of the stuff you're talking about right now, as far as like, we can make it smell different. Like there's all these awesome ways to be creative in this game that, I don't know, I don't think enough people take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think we notice it too much to the point where sometimes it's hard to enjoy a show.
Yeah.
Because we're always thinking about how it could be different, like just the setup. Like I feel like this year in particular, obviously like 360 sets are all the rage. And I understand why, because I feel like for a long, long time, like when EDM was like popping off hard and peaking, the setup was very much like crowd, stage, DJ, and there's this big separation between the two.
Yeah.
And I think like bringing back that boiler room vibe, which, it's been around forever, but just bringing that vibe back to like everyone's sets, like to me, it just felt refreshing and new. I just felt more connected to the fans and the party. I mean, because you're literally partying with everyone. You're like in there with everyone. So like, it's almost like bad for like our livers, because I'm like drinking way more tequila now. Because when you're separated from the crowd, you can slowly just sip on some kombucha out there, and it's all good.
Yeah.
If you're on the crowd with everyone on the ground, you have to party with them. At least I do. I just want to go at it with them.
You got to do something to connect. I definitely feel you on that. Because for me, like I almost don't drink at shows at all anymore. And I still do drink in my personal life, but there was something about it for me that it was just not really working anymore. But because of that, you really do have to find other ways to connect too. Like I know what you mean. When the people are right in front of you, you have to do something to sort of like, just like shock yourself into the moment, or else it's going to be real bad for the rest of the show,
Yeah, you have to get in the right mindset, right? I feel like it's easier to get in that mindset if you're separated from the crowd and, you can drink your tea or whatever you want
right.
back there. But you can still like give the same energy. But when they're actually on top of you, it's a little harder to connect, especially if everyone's like on a different level. They're all, fucked up partying.
Yeah.
And like, you might be sober guy, you might not be, so it's like, how do you connect on a different level?
Yeah.
I haven't figured that out. I've just been drinking a lot of tequila.
I mean, there's nothing.
On this tour.
There's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, that's super fun too. I don't know. I think it's all cycles, right? Like in the same way, I look at like the way I live my life a bit in like cycles or seasons. And I think music is the same way. The way you were saying, like it got really big and now it's getting really intimate. It's all a pendulum. I feel like, you stay in the game long enough. I'm sure you guys know this. It's like I always laugh when you see a bunch of people hopping on whatever trend is popping off, because you stay in this game long enough and you know what's going to happen to that trend,
Yeah, it's just going to get buried.
Yeah,
basically,
like everything has its moment, everything has its life cycle, but it's, I don't know. I get it. When I was younger, I thought like everything was going to stay the same forever too,
It's cool to see the reemergence of trends from the past though come back, like especially like some of like the vocals that I'm hearing now in songs and stuff are very reminiscent of maybe some of the stuff from past eras. And some of the sounds, especially in some of like the newer techno stuff and whatnot. So it's really cool to see that reemergence of certain elements from the past now, like making it back.
I agree. I mean, I would actually almost use that as a way to talk about the Affirmations album, because I was listening to it earlier today and it's a great album. I really like it. And there were a few different tracks where you tell me if I'm wrong, I thought I could hear some references to like older eras, older styles, kind of recontextualized, put in sort of a modern light. But it did feel like you were reaching back a little bit to me.
Yeah, I would say kind of everything's a trend, right? Everything's a cycle. Even like the choice of the drums you use, right? I just feel like for a long time, it was just like 909s and house music. And I feel like it's gotten away from that. But obviously that's going to come back, obviously. And so I just feel like in the album, it just kind of had a mix of everything. There's like some of the like newer techno elements, but then some of the older deep house elements. Obviously, a lot of the like core M1 piano sounds from classic deep house is in there a little bit. But yeah, it's just kind of just playing around with, things from every era and just trying to make something cool with it,
Well, how does it, for putting together an album, say, as opposed to like a string of singles, that kind of thing, how does it hold together in your guys' minds? Like when you're writing the album or when you're thinking about the album, because obviously like the album is called Affirmations and there's sort of a philosophical underpinning to the whole concept that we can definitely talk about in a second. But does that extend musically? Like when you're writing a song, say you're writing a song, you finish it, are you able to say this is an album song or this isn't, this is maybe for something else?
I'd say that's a challenge with an album. Like I think doing albums is hard, especially in dance music, because things change so fast, trends change so fast, your own taste change so fast. And if you're working on an album like over the course of a year, it's really hard to make it very cohesive. I feel like that happens when all the tracks are kind of made in a very similar time period. For example, we just finished a shitload of tracks after the album we're like, well, shit, maybe we should just make another album because it's like, it's cohesive. And I just feel like as an artist, you kind of get, at least for me, I don't like cohesive is important, but I feel like that's probably one of our challenges at Autograf. If you look at our discography going back from the beginning, it is like a lot of different styles. It is a little bit all over the place. And I think it just speaks to us and like maybe our desire or boredom of just sticking to one thing or one sound or something. We also want to try something new, especially if it's like interesting.
I think you see artists that do like, they'll take off from touring, go write an album and then tour off that album. Where with us, we're writing these songs as we're touring and that's influencing the music that we're writing in the moment. So it kind of changes over the course of that year through just touring and what we're experiencing with crowds and feedback and, everything that's going on. So it changes up the album and the sound, even month to month, what we're like loving.
Sure, of course. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense in the sense of, albums are time capsules of an artist's life, right? Like it's like whatever is going on in your life in some way or another that plays out on an album. And if that's your life at the time, right? Like you're touring, you're hearing a lot of different sounds, you're seeing a lot of different places, talking to a lot of different people. Maybe that gives a sort of more broad output for you as an artist, rather than say you take 3 months off and you lock yourself in a closet and do nothing but write songs. Then, I guess the expectation would be maybe some of those songs sonically are closer together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of like a traditional approach. People like the Beatles would do that, right? Or like a lot of the classic rock bands.
Yeah.
They just go lock themselves up and they create something. Whereas I think you're pretty much nailing it. This is just kind of a reflection of our lives. Because if you listen to the album, you can see there's dark, moody moments, and then there's just kind of just fun, happy party vibes. And now that I'm thinking about like that, the fun, happy party vibes, I remember it's just like this time period where we're just in the summer playing pool parties and house parties and boat parties and just doing that whole thing. And then like winter hits and it's just like, okay, well now we're like really into this dark, moody urban stuff. So yeah, I guess you're helping me psychoanalyze our own album.
Well, let me ask you guys, you were saying the cohesive angle can be hard to pin down for you sometimes. It made me curious, if you think back to when you guys started Autograf, can you remember what was on your mind at the time? Like the thought of like, let's start this new thing. We want it to be like this. I'm missing this, so I want to make that, those kinds of thoughts. Like what was going on when you first formed the group?
I think funny enough, it was really about like that Boiler Room 360 vibe. The very first show we did was a 360 show. This was 10 years ago.
That was the like art gallery show, right?
Yeah. We really had this idea of like merging art and music and experiential show into this 360 set that was all immersive. And that was the first show. And you kind of see that now. It's coming up. It's crazy. It's going to be 10 years this Halloween for Autograf.
Nice.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty insane. I think Michael's nailing something here. So we're really about the whole like Boiler Room 360 vibe and making it also like an art experience at the same time, like beyond just a 360 Boiler Room party, like where the actual venue, the actual stage is an art installation where everyone is a part of it. So that was kind of like the original idea with Autograf. And it's funny to see that come full circle now, like, 360 is all the rage. But I feel like the evolution of Autograf's kind of like this album where all of a sudden we were doing that 360 experience, but then our attention got diverted elsewhere. And then we started like doing this live electronica thing. And it kind of went down that road for a while. And then now we're coming back to this 360 thing. It's just like all these cycles and whatnot. I just feel like it's like, if you wanted to be cohesive as an artist and that was your brand from the get-go, just doing only 360 Boiler Room style parties, you should just stick to that. But I would say, in the same manner, like our albums, we have a hard time keeping cohesive. We just see a lot of other shiny objects out there we want to like gravitate towards as well.
I mean, it's a good question for anyone making art or doing anything creative, is sort of, how do you know when it's time to pivot or time to sort of follow a whim versus, how do you know when you should sort of stick to your guns and focus in on an idea? It's a really hard line to navigate. I mean, I feel like you guys have and have always had good instincts for sort of when to pivot or when to make a leap or to try new ideas. But I don't know how much of that, I guess the question is, how much of that is intentional versus instinctive for you guys?
I think if you notice, like we're talking about these cycles, I almost feel like every artist and DJ is going through the same emotions. And it gets to a point where everyone kind of gets sick of doing the same thing. And then it almost feels like everyone roughly around the same time kind of pivots to something else. I almost feel like it's a natural thing. And that's how it was when we started Autograf, because we had a different music project before, which was like much more EDM, heavy bass.
Oh, I'm very aware of. Are we not naming this prior project?
It's called Midnight Conspiracy,
which was fucking huge. I mean, that's the craziest.
It's massive.
In Chicago, I remember when you guys started that, and I remember how big it got, especially in the region. I mean, it was really big for a while there.
Yeah, I get very nostalgic about that time period because it felt like we built something really big, and I would say it was very grassroots because we built it from Chicago up, like with actual the community and people there. Whereas Autograf started out by just like putting songs out on the internet and all that catching fire, and then we're able to tour and connect, like on a international or national level. but where I just felt like
even that,
it's like a different experience.
Yeah.
It's something being very
well, and even that,
right?
not to cut you off, but you just made me realize that even what you're talking about is another one of those cycles where when Midnight Conspiracy came up, absolutely, it was built locally and regionally and like in a sort of community-based way. And I think a lot of time, like that was one of the last ones. You know what I mean? I think it's much more common in 2023 for people to launch off the internet. Not that there aren't still local scenes and people who build themselves up in their city. Of course, that still happens all the time. But I think you're right. The internet model was starting to become sort of the prevailing one to launch yourself.
Even with some of these like more what started as kind of like local parties like Brownies and Lemonade or Space Shout or something like that, I think a lot of what caught fire for them was still the internet side of it. Even though it did start kind of like as a local party, it really was the internet that blew those like projects up and those parties, as a brand.
Yeah.
Versus, just being something that was built only locally with like almost like a street team type mentality. I don't think you see that much at all anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you're making me realize that, of course, to be sort of that elite tier, those people you just named, like Brownies and Lemonade, Space Yacht, all of them, it's because they're good at both, right? Like they built it locally and they were killing it on the internet, making smart moves, posting shit people wanted to see, being consistent, but then also really, being boots on the ground as well. Like the last time I talked to those Space Yacht guys, it's crazy to me that they still show up at their party every week. You know what I mean? Like to me, that kind of dedication, that kind of consistency, I'm like, it sounds like a small thing, but after that many years, man, not a lot of people would do it,
I was just thinking about how, like, I guess at this point, a lot of promoters have been around for a long time. A lot of them became really big, like they're throwing festivals and whatnot. And, I feel like I miss the days of like the small promoter where they're just like a fan of the music. They're bringing you out. They actually want to like hang out with you. And it's not like a business transaction.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to see. Because like all those promoters who originally started like that, a lot of them came huge and became like just these large groups, promotion groups. But then like when 2020 hit and quarantine, and then some of the first shows out of quarantine were kind of like just newer, out of nowhere promoters. And that was pretty refreshing to see because like a lot of the big players were just kind of like out the market because of liability reasons or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It reshuffled the deck a little bit.
Yeah. In a good way, I think. It left an opportunity for like just a newcomer to come in and fill the void. Because I almost feel like these promoters become almost monopolistic in their city or whatever.
Oh, of course. And I mean, it ends up like capitalism always wins in the end, right? So, now these giant conglomerates are buying up independent promoters as soon as they reach a certain ceiling. And everything ends up sort of becoming the same after a while. It's got to be tough, man. I've always said promoter is like, to me, maybe the hardest job out of any of the angles of this business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're all hard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Absolutely. Of course. I don't know. I guess, let me rephrase that. Promoter is the one I least want to do.
When we first started, we're doing a lot of promotions and we had like our weekly parties and monthly parties in Chicago. And there was something to say about, how fun that was in getting to know people more locally and kind of having that versus now we go to cities and a lot of times we don't know people in those cities and, we're just there to play a show. So that was a cool thing about being a promoter is like getting to know people and like having that base of like almost friends that you go out with and stuff versus now just showing up at a show and you might not know anyone at that show, even though we have like hundreds of people there to see us.
That's a good point. And again, that goes back to, I think, the community thing, the building locally thing that I still, it's harder to do now, I think. But man, if you're an up and coming artist and you can figure out a way to do that wherever you're at, the benefits can be huge if you're smart about it and consistent, Yeah,
we threw our first party at, their album release party. First party in a long, long time. And it kind of took me back to like what it was like to throw a party. And I don't know, it was a huge success. It was insane. It was packed, like beyond capacity and all that. But yeah, just remember it just took me back to the beginning when you were actually had to be engaged with every facet of an event, you know?
Yeah.
From like the drink sponsors, who are the promoters, and who's going to shoot video, who's going to like, I mean, it's way more work than like, us showing up to a show for sure. And I'm not sure why we did it, but sometimes you just do things because it seems like it might be fun. But
well, it's another thing I've appreciated about you guys over the years is a lot of the times you're not you will choose the more difficult route.
Yes, yes, we do that a lot, especially when it came to building a lot of these tours.
Can you talk about, sorry, I keep cutting you off, but just can you talk about quickly, just for people who don't understand, like maybe people listening to this who haven't seen you live or saw you and didn't even realize what was going on, but like, can you talk about some of the, like you're building sets yourselves, like with your guys' own hands, that at least at a certain point, you were your own stage crew too. So you're, setting it up every night on stage, tearing it down after the shows. Parts are breaking. You got to fix stuff and get to the next city. Can you talk about that? Because it's so unique. Like just very few people are doing that in DJ world at this point.
Yeah, and even with the help we had like 2 people with us on the last tour setting it up, because we pretty much built it ourselves and it was so DIY the way it was built. It still required, if anything ever went wrong, like every wire, like I had to know where it was going. Basically, it was hard to even train somebody on that because of the way we put it together. But yeah, with that too, with those tours, yeah, like everything down to the lighting. Like we were running lighting, from stage for visuals from stage. It was all linked through Ableton. Running it's like just everything was just linked. We had like 3 computers up there running everything, and sending MIDI back to Lewis's keyboard. He was sending MIDI back to me so we could keep everything in sync, and it's kind of crazy to do that all there on stage.
There was one tour where Michael found all these cool light bars. They look like lightsabers, where you just hold in, just like right. They look like lightsabers, and I'm like, man, that'd be really cool for a stage. But like, what do we do with these lights? We had no idea. And then we started just welding these like metal beams to like hold up the lights in very random directions until the point, once it was built, it just looked like a lightsaber force.
Right.
Because you just had to, from the crowd's point of view, you only see the lights. So they're just kind of floating in air. And then, but something like that, you can't just like find someone. I guess you could find someone to build it. That's what like guys like Meow, who built Meow Wolf, probably do stuff like that. But a lot of times if you have an idea, you just have to figure out how to do it. And a lot of times that means just building it.
Well, yeah. And I think the way you guys do it, it's like, of course you could there's tons of talented people who could build something for you and make it look cool. But I think because it's you guys doing it and sort of showing your audience, like you figuring it out, there's like a very strong charm to that. To me, it makes it feel more intimate when you look at it and like, sure, maybe not every single piece is like polished and perfect, like off a movie set. But for me, I connect with that more because then you actually, I don't know, at least for me, when I look at it, I'm looking at the work that went into it. And for me, I'm like, wow, these guys spent a lot of time on it. Like there must be something going on here for you guys to work this hard on it. Like it makes me more intrigued as a viewer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like we're just like ants in an ant farm where we have no control and we're just doing these things that we don't have to necessarily do. Sometimes I like to psychoanalyze, like what is our motive sometimes, but sometimes you're just drawn to do something.
Well, let me ask you, because I don't think we've ever talked about this, and I don't think I even actually know your backgrounds, both of you guys, before all the DJ shit happened. Like, were you guys both, are you from the Chicago area originally?
I was born in Chicago, yeah.
I grew up in Virginia and I moved to Chicago to trade options on the exchange there. So I was a trader.
Wow.
And basically, one day I was like, man, I'm just like analytical, thinking about numbers all day. I need to do something creative. So I tried a bunch of things. None of them were really sticking. And then my friends were like just DJing, and they just started to show me. So I got hooked on it and started learning.
Did you have any kind of musical background before that?
Barely. Like a year of guitar in high school, a year of violin in middle school. I'd say that's the extent of it. So I remember when I first started learning how to DJ, I just could not count the beats. It's like really hard. I'm like, I don't hear what you're talking about. I think that was also my weak point in, I remember orchestra, 7th grade orchestra. We're like performing for like parents and whatnot. And afterwards, I didn't even realize I was doing this. The conductor says, "You were stomping your feet like up and down, trying to keep in time up there." So I just don't think I had like a natural inclination for timing and rhythm, but I eventually figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, did you have to, because that can be hard. I mean, people, I guess it's something I've always felt lucky for, is that the intrinsic stuff, the rhythms, knowing what sounds good together, that kind of thing. I always just sort of understood it. But then, yeah, there's lots of people who like can't carry a tune or have no rhythm. And did it just get better over time? Did you like spend a bunch of time working on it? That's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story of my life. Like everything I had to work on a lot. I'd say I'm not naturally gifted in any area. My gift is just like having complete OCD and like work ethic and like not going to sleep until I figure something out. And so with that, I just had to like make a mental exercise of like, I had like visualized it in my head of like the bars within like the phrasing of a song, like 32 beats, and then cut it up into like 16, so basically I would just like watch this beat like a ball move around in my head through each phrase of the song until we got to like 8 beats, 8 beats, 8 beats, 8 beats. Then we're done with that whole 32 beat section.
Right.
I mean, it's very kind of, I was coming from an analytical space. So that's how I was like trying to figure it out. And it's just
now it's also a lot easier with like the waveforms and stuff. I remember like the first show Lewis played was like he brought all this vinyl with him, and he was like
really hard.
Yeah.
I was trying to learn. I learned on vinyl to start with, which made it even harder. Yeah, could you imagine? Like you don't know what the BPM of the song is, and you just have to like guess or get it.
I started on vinyl too, man, for years. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. And Michael, I'll get back to you in a second, but let me just close the loop on this story with you, Lewis. I have a prediction. Tell me if I'm right. Were you the kind of kid who like didn't enjoy or didn't do well in school, but then once you found something that you legitimately were interested in, like went in, 1000%?
I would just say I was whatever about school. Like apathetic about school. I got good enough grades to get by, but I feel like there was no indication of your observing me as a young teenager that this guy's got crazy work ethic. It wasn't until I found things I was obsessed about, then I was just like, I cannot stop working.
What was the first one? Do you remember?
I say the early one was guitar, actually. For a year, I was obsessed with it. And a lot of these obsessions, I kind of have to stop because it takes over my life where I can't do anything else. And I think I stopped because I was going to college. I was like, I just don't want to be like spending every hour of my day. I don't know. I'm thinking,
that's interesting because that's almost like an addiction, but it's like a positive addiction, No,
most of the addictions I have are pretty positive. I don't get addicted to substances at all. Maybe food, but not really. I have pretty good willpower. But I feel like I don't have great willpower when it comes to like if I'm working on something I'm passionate about. And I would say that's like kind of what's been the detriment of like my own personal relationships, because I'm just like, I've always put that first. And so, but that's enabled me to excel because I feel like maybe I don't have natural ability, but I think anyone can learn anything, right?
Yeah.
So you can figure it out.
Yeah, with enough time, I always think about that, and that's like it's what they always say about singing. That literally anyone on the planet could be a great singer if you just practice singing for hours every single day. You know?
Yeah, any instrument too. And my mom's always been trying to get me to sing. I cannot sing at all, but I do recognize that a lot of people who cannot sing can learn how to sing. So it's probably a good skill to have.
I've been thinking about, I've been thinking about doing some singing lessons. I feel like I'm like in that pre-midlife crisis phase where I'm trying to pick what my midlife crisis is going to be, you know? So it's like, yeah, maybe I'll just, start singing for like 8 hours a day, or, you know, maybe I'll go live in the jungle. I don't know yet. It'll take me a few years to figure it out, but I feel like I'm ready to start thinking about the midlife crisis.
I do think singing is, because we all have to worry about our jobs becoming obsolete with AI, right?
I feel like, do we really? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's many things that AI won't be able to do.
I don't know. I don't think AI is ever going to be able to like write an Autograf song. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
The other day, it's like a lot of just like math and formulas and rhythms and patterns and all that. Like they're already like analyzing this stuff. Like we've been talking to this one AI music making company, and they have like they're asked because they want to make like an Autograf like template, and they see like kind of analyze our music, maybe our sessions, and try to make music out that. And I know they're doing a bunch of other artists as well. And I don't know. I don't think there's. I mean, I guess why do you think it's not possible?
I guess I'm not fully sold on the AI being able to emulate the human element at any point. Like of course, it's already incredible. Like it can already make really good sounding loops and samples and even full songs. I mean, and people we know are doing crazy work like Kurt, Flosstradamus Kurt has this like AI voice company that's like working with all these big singers to sort of, you know, get like huge chunks of their voice, train the AI on their voice, and then you can almost collaborate with these singers, you know, like the AI version of these. Say, like, there's incredible stuff going on, and it's all accelerating and all that. But I don't know, man. There's something. Maybe I'm just not, you know, seeing the threat yet. But for me, I'm just like, there's a certain human element, like they making interesting choices, making choices that resonate emotionally. I don't see it yet. I don't know. Don't get me wrong. AI is absolutely going to change the way we do what we do, but I guess I'm just not that worried. I don't know. Maybe I should be.
I'm not that worried. I mean, I think we'll just adapt to the use of technology. I mean, people were saying the same thing about the use of drum machines. Like, oh, that's going to like replace drummers, or the electric guitar to acoustic guitar. Just, you know, all the music technology. Even like we look at like DAWs now versus like people have to go to like these huge studios and record multi-track. And now you can do it all in like the box in a computer. And there's crazy emulators for all these synths and stuff that sound just as good as, you know, the analog versions of them now. So it's just gonna be another tool in the toolbox, you know, come, you know, the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. What are you guys, how much have you fucked around with AI stuff for music production or like art stuff? Like, are you using it or thinking about using it for any Autograf stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we've used it. Well, like one, I think there's a lot of AI stuff just in DAWs now in general.
Yeah, true.
Like you look mastering programs, they have AIs built into them that help analyze stuff like Soothe and, you know, some of these plugins that use AI to some extent, you know, and that's just going to keep getting stronger. And then on the art side, yeah, I come from an art background, so it's like really been into like the art side of it from when like it first got released a couple of years ago.
Well, yeah. So let me turn back to your background then, Michael, because for you, you're born in Chicago. Growing up, like how did you get started with the visual art side of stuff?
Let's see, it's tough. I guess like just post high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Went to college for like a year, came back to Chicago, wanted to stay in Chicago. And there was just in Wicker Park at the time, like when I was in high school, even there was like this really emerging cool art scene in Wicker Park happening that I was really drawn to. I can't even remember the name of some of the spaces, those lofts that were on Milwaukee Avenue over there.
There were so many, and you know, one would pop up and one would close, and I feel like I partied in like each one of them like once, and then it would close and some new one would open, you know?
But those parties are just really cool, I thought, and they were like immersive. They had like artists working out of there, but they're also throwing parties. And then when I first like moved into my first loft with 4 buddies, we were like, well, how can we like pay our rent? Basically, let's throw some parties, you know? So we started throwing some parties and just paying our rent with that. And then I went on to try to open up this art gallery at the Congress Theater with them, which was really tough. But another way, just like, oh, like how can this art thing work out? And throwing parties was always a good way to like make some extra income at the time.
And I mean, really don't you have like a space in LA now too, right? Like an art collab kind of space.
Yeah, we have the music studio, photo studio, called Project Parallel, and then I just opened up a new space in Venice called The Kin. So yeah, it's like cool collaborative spaces.
It's wild, man. I mean, how do you even balance like, you know, like running a space, finding a space, maintain, like all of that is a lot of work too. How are you, like, what does a typical day look like for you at this point?
I don't know. It's just a lot. Trying to do as much as I can. Not sleeping, I guess.
Well, and so I mean, for you, how did the music thing come in? If you're out like running in an art space, and was it just sort of being exposed to like that burgeoning Chicago scene? Exposed to it.
I was throwing parties before I was DJing them, and it was just I lived with some guys, and they were all DJs from Chicago, and we had decks in the house, and they're just like, you know, learn how to do this. DJ some parties. So yeah, just through that I just started getting into it, just having the equipment around, and met Lewis, and he was like DJ. I wasn't even DJing when I booked Lewis for his first gig, and we started just kind of like DJing some stuff together, and it was just kind of just like a hobby at the time, and just like a way to open up. I couldn't find openers maybe, so I was like, oh, I could just DJ it myself and open.
Yeah. And what was, because I think this was before I even met you guys. So what sort of scene era are we talking about? Like what was the music of the time? What was really popping off? Like when you both started, you know, like early DJing or early throwing parties, what kind of music was playing?
Justice era.
Justice era, like the Blockhouse era, yeah.
Like indie electro, indie dance, all that.
The scene in Chicago was fucking great at that time, man. Like I still think about that era of Chicago, and there were just so many. Cause it wasn't just you guys, and it wasn't just me or just Flostradamus. Like there were so many people with their own little micro scenes or their own parties, and everyone would kind of bleed into everyone else. And every night of the week, there was some weird thing going on you could go out to. And I don't know, it just felt, it was one of those times where like it felt so big and so small at the same time. Like it was blowing up, but then at the same time, you knew everybody and everyone would just hang out. You know what I mean?
I mean, even before I was like throwing parties and DJing, I remember how I got into it. I was doing live screen printing at some of these parties. I was like screen printing stuff and making merch. I remember like even for like Kurt from Floss, like I made these gold like metallic buttons for Flostradamus to give away at their like get out of the hood party they used to have, and just stuff like that. I was just like kind of working on that side of things to start before I was playing music.
Do you have a like art background? Where did all this come from? Like, did your parents do art?
No, my dad did silk screening. He owned a silk screen company in Chicago. I remember, I guess I have like in high school, I had this digital art teacher because I wasn't really into art prior to that too much. And I had this digital art teacher. It's like the first digital art class I took. And I just really got into the way you can make art with a computer, and just this merge of like technology and art just really sparked my interest. And just kind of went down that rabbit hole of stuff. And this was in high school, and mixed media stuff and early like video stuff, like having, just like cool stuff you could do on a computer with art at that time. This was a while back. So just seeing that progress, I was always very interested in it.
What was the first time, this is an open question for either of you. What was the first time you realized that you could actually potentially make actual money off of these weird passions? Like, do you remember whatever that was?
I don't know.
Because like what you're talking about, all these things, it's so time intensive and labor intensive.
It was so time intensive, and you made very little money off of it.
Dude, of course.
I mean, I was just trying to get by back then, like selling some t-shirts here and there, throwing a party, just trying to make, rent come together each month through all these different artistic endeavors, from the art side to the party side. I don't know when that moment when I was like, oh yeah, I could like do this as a career. It's always this weird journey to where it is now.
Do you feel like you're still, like maybe you just never really had that thought, and then all of a sudden...
maybe never really had that. I do remember the first time we went to South by Southwest and just how broke I was. It's like just getting down there, and I remember like we were just like eating like Taco Bell or something while we were down there, and going to all the parties that had free food and free drinks and stuff like that. And it was like also just so exciting because it was like the first time playing outside of like Chicago at the time. So it was like a little road trip. We like drove from Chicago to Austin and played some parties along the way as well. And just, that was really cool for me, even though I was like so broke at the time. Like just ability to go outside of Chicago and do this was just so cool. And like,
when your mind expands to realize that that there's maybe not such a separation. Like you always look at these things you don't have or that you're not doing, and you're like, oh, that would be so amazing. And then all of a sudden you're just doing it and you don't feel any different. And yeah, maybe you're still broke or whatever, but it's all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, it's the secret to so many things in life where it's like, if you want to do this thing, you just start doing it, which sounds so simple, but it's like, it's so hard to conceptualize that when you're younger, You also just took me way back with the going to the parties that had the free food. I did that so much for a couple of years at South by. It was just like, and it was like gossip. It was like, oh, if you go over to the Fader Fort, they've got like sliders over there. I had forgotten about that, man. Well, okay. So to kind of start like bringing this home here, I want to bring it back to the Affirmations album, because I think a lot of this conversation, we're sort of talking about the journey of it, the evolution of you guys musically and as people, and the philosophical underpinnings of the Affirmations album. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but a lot of it seems to be about sort of what you've learned at a certain point and like, how you're able to keep doing what you're doing and be excited about it and maintain it and keep evolving. Am I kind of on the right track with any of that?
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot of what we've been talking about. Kind of like going back to when I first started DJing, and I felt like, man, I don't know what's going on here. And I think it's just natural when you do anything to feel like you're an imposter. So like everyone has like an imposter syndrome. And I feel like I've always had these thoughts like, oh man, I'm not really a real DJ. I'm not really a real musician. I'm just here like being, trying to do it all. There's people who are just like born just maestros, right? And then I just kind of found that in life, it's kind of like what you're saying. If you just do it, you become it. But you have to believe it. And I think that's where Affirmations comes into play, at least in my life. Like the minute I start saying I am these things before I am these things, then I start believing that I am those things, then I actually can better work towards becoming that. Because all this stuff was always intimidating to me, like music, DJing, producing, even playing live. Like I just felt like I was like, I don't have natural talent. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
Even they're incredible on it. And I think it's just about changing the way you view the world, changing the frame, the way you frame everything. In essence, for us, is like changing the story in our minds. Instead of like telling ourselves, I'm not talented, I didn't spend 12 years playing piano. Why don't you just tell yourself you're going to be an amazing creative musician and you can do anything if you put your mind to it. And so that's where affirmations came for me. It's just like, it is a lesson that I feel like I've somehow figured out at some point in my life. And it's really, really helped me because now I just feel empowered to be able to do anything. Because I really feel like anyone can do anything. Like with the YouTube, there's just so much knowledge. You can literally learn anything you want. And the same for like producing any music or anything like that. If I just wanted to learn how to play trombone, I could probably just learn it. Not saying I will, but like anything is possible is what we're saying. So it's basically just to stop your limiting beliefs, like shut that off, change the story of your mind to something more positive and work towards that because we can do anything. And it's like you said, if you just do it, that's half the battle, really. You're on your way.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, hearing you talk about sort of the production side of it too, and how that was something you sort of picked up, along the way, that it wasn't always your background and that you've kind of just gotten to that place through, time and hard work. I did want to, for a second, just give a shout out to the former third member of Autograf, Jake, who I know, at the start is such an interesting dude. And he was like technically spot on. Like I remember being really impressed with him early on. It's just, he seemed to know how to do everything with production and everything he made was so good. My point, I guess I'm getting to is like when we don't have to go into the whole story, but he leaves the group at a certain point. And was that a hard moment? Was that one of those like imposter syndrome moments where all of a sudden it's like, oh, now there's like one less of us to sort of, it's like we're even closer to the front of the stage. Like there's even more light on us at this point. You know what I mean?
I would feel it was maybe an existential moment as opposed to an imposter moment. It's more of a moment where we contemplated, should we continue on or should we just move on to other endeavors in life? And I think that's what that moment, I mean, obviously we continued on, but it was a very real moment in terms of what we were going to do with everything. And so we kept going and here we are.
Well, was that even that? Because I think a lot of what we're talking about here, what I'm getting from you guys, and some of what I'm going to take with me after we finish talking is sort of not being too precious about things, not planning everything to the last iota, but being able to go with the flow and be flexible and be okay in moments of uncertainty, that sort of thing. Like, for you, was that existential moment and needing to make a decision, was it even a concrete decision, or was it just another one of those like, well, let's see how it goes, and then you kind of wake up a little later and you're like, okay, seems to be going pretty good. We can kind of take this new direction.
I think when something like that happens, I'm trying to remember it exactly in the moment. I think when things like that happen, you go into like putting out fires mode or problem solving. So at that point, I think I just went straight to the studio. That's what I did, I think, and just started working. Didn't really like leave the studio. I mean, studio being like, I remember that month was like my mom's living room or dining room. Moved to my apartment later, but I think it was just like, yeah, we had the existential question for a second. Couldn't really make a decision. And so you just consumed your time with work. And I know Michael did the same thing. We kind of just separately went off into the studio and kind of just like, well, I don't know what else to do. Let's just work. Let's see what happens. And
It's
then
funny because I was at my mom's at that time too. For some reason.
it was Thanksgiving, I think, when that happened, right?
That's what it was. I think. Yeah, it was right on the holidays.
Yeah. So then all of December, I was just like, fuck it. Like, I don't know if I was like, fuck it. I was just more like, let's fucking do this kind of thing. I don't know. But yeah, I think we had the existential question. And obviously you never really answer it because you don't know. And then, so I don't know what else to do with myself other than just like work to see if we can make this happen on our own. And then that's what we did.
I mean, I relate to that in the sense I have a similar reaction to, again, I was saying earlier, like my anxiety has sort of gone up as an ambient level as I've gotten older. And what I've noticed is that generally when it goes the best, like the smartest thing for me is when I'm feeling that kind of anxiety or when there's some kind of immediate fire to put out, like you were saying, that the best thing for me almost 100% of the time is just immediately trying to funnel all of that emotion or energy into some kind of work, into some kind of productivity, into doing something rather than trying to like outthink the problem. You know what I mean? Because pretty much every time when I'm feeling shitty or, you know, just questioning or whatever it is, if I really force myself to sit down and just do something, make something, whatever it is, music, you know, art, literally anything, cleaning the house, whatever, after that, you feel better. And I think your brain has a way of like sort of doing the math in the background. Like you almost figure it out by not thinking about it in a weird way.
I will also say like one of our ethos when we started Autograf and why we chose like the Andy Warhol theme in his factory is like in our mind, we had something we called failure factory. It was kind of just like a mindset thing where we realized everything in our life, where we grew and learned from the most was our failures.
Yeah.
And so obviously when something like that happened, that was like a so-called failure. And I only had like one choice in my mind. It's like, how do I learn and grow from this and overcome it? And I know Michael takes the same mentality as well. We all do. So does Jake. And so it's just like one of those things where if I didn't have kind of these like things rooted or grounded, philosophical things grounded in my mind, like affirmations and a growth mindset and embracing failure, things like that, then yeah, that would have been a difficult time. But I just felt like we were on autopilot, like trying to figure out how to learn and grow from it. So obviously you only learn when you fail.
Yeah.
And when everything's going well, you're not really learning.
I think that's part of getting older and getting more mature too, right? It's like getting stoked when something goes wrong or like trying to train yourself to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Getting stoked. Because like after that happened, we ended up changing a lot of things because like we're burning out. You know, that's one of the reasons why Jake was having his issues because like we were touring way too heavily. We were taking way too many commitments, accepting like every interview, accepting like just doing whatever we could to get to that next level.
Yeah.
And it had a consequence and we didn't realize it while we were doing it. And so there's big lessons to be learned for that.
Yeah, no doubt. By the way, Failure Factory, great album title. If you're looking for album 3, I would highly consider Failure. That's a
like
great
that,
album.
Huh? Yeah. Think about that one. What do you think, Michael?
Like that, yeah. It's a cool name. I think we kind of have this concept though for this third album right now.
All right,
I already have a
fourth album. Yeah.
Fourth album. Maybe it's like a B-side album or something. I don't know. Like
hey, we'll need a fourth album.
Maybe all the songs that didn't make it on the album are in the Failure Factory
That's
album.
pretty good. I think we're kind of cooking here. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Man. Well, what is, you know, to kind of wrap up the whole thing, like the album's out, it's great. Are you guys on the road pretty heavy or coming up?
Yeah, we've been in the middle of the tour. This is the Affirmations tour. And I think we're coming towards the end. So yeah.
And there's like 6 or 7 dates left and then we're done.
And then what happens after that? Like where's your head at as far as the project now? Like it sounds like, I mean, the album's great. It sounds like the tour has been going well. How far down the line are you thinking? Like, do you have sort of a vision of like where you want to take this next?
It's crazy right now. We have so much music actually that we're working on that's like ready to be released. So I think we're just really excited to get this new music that we're working on out, in a timely manner, because we're just loving some of these new songs, playing them out at shows and stuff and seeing people's reactions. Just really excited to get those songs out as well. So it's like kind of this, like, it's awesome to see the album come out and all of that. And then it's like, all right, we're ready for the next song type of thing, and just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure you're sick of the album at this point because you've been listening to it for years.
No, actually, no. I was listening to it all this weekend in Denver because it's nice to actually hear it like in a different medium, like on Spotify, in a hotel room, on your laptop. And because you experience it differently, because like people listen to music on the go, on their phone, and all these things, versus like me in a laboratory trying to figure out the song order and stuff like that. It's like, it's nice to like listen to it organically.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was just looking over song order, like ideas for the album, and then like listening to it and seeing how that kind of affected the feel of the album, like where songs were placed on the album and what order they were in.
It's funny how you perceive something differently once all the layers have been flattened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like once you can't adjust the snare volume anymore, once you can't adjust the track listing, and it's just sort of a flat product that, the way you would consume anything else. It's interesting. I mean, how is it different? Like thinking about it or experiencing it now, do you look back and do you see the effects of some of the small choices? Does it feel different? Does it make you nostalgic? Like any reflections now that it's out and you're seeing people experience it?
It's much more of an emotional feeling now versus putting it all together. Because like you said, like now nothing can be touched. Nothing can be adjusted. No mixing decisions can be made. You can't change the order. So you have to just listen to it as a song, as a body of work, as music, instead of like a technical thing, like that bass line is not loud enough or that kick is too quiet. Like all that is just thrown out. Now you're just like living your actual life, and it's like now a soundtrack part of your life. That's at least how I was doing it this weekend in Denver, just going around doing things, listening to it, and just having an emotional experience.
That's amazing. You could have that, man. I think there are certain artists, people we all know who I don't know. There are some people who I don't think can ever get to that point with their own work. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't think we're too hard on ourselves. I'd say once it's done, it's done. Well, I guess, yeah. You're right. I'm always getting pissed off about mastering and mix. Maybe because I was listening to this on a laptop and a phone, so like the experience is different. But yeah, I'm always really annoyed by like how something might sound at a club or in some speakers or something like that. But I didn't experience that this weekend because I was only listening to it on a laptop and on my phone, like phone speakers.
Right.
So ask me in a week.
Yeah. I like that. That was
I probably won't listen to it.
That was a great full circle emotional arc where you were like, no, it was great. I totally disconnected and I had this great emotional. And within 5 minutes, we're back to like fucking mastering.
Yeah.
That's great.
There's one song where we have like two masters, and sometimes on this one song we go back and forth. What version do we play out of it? Like one is like hits harder, but it's kind of harsher. One is like smoother, but doesn't maybe hit it. I don't know.
One is better for at home listening, and one's better for the club. That's like two different things, and you can only pick one. So,
well, at least you can play the aggressive one at the shows, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Other DJs can't.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, man, it's fucking great to see you guys and catch up, man. Is there anything we haven't touched on? Anything else you want to say about the album or what's coming up, or just anything else on your mind before we get out of here?
I feel like we got to everything, which is awesome.
No, this is
I guess. Do you kind of have? I'm curious. Like, do you have an underlying goal with your talks? Like, is it to learn something profound? Is it just, I guess in general, I'm just curious about like your your take on when you're interviewing? Like, is there something you're looking to like dig out of an artist or what?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's that I'm looking to dig anything out of anybody. I think, and this is true for my podcast, I think it's true for most musicians or anyone who makes art, where there's kind of this idea that it's like, oh no, I'm contributing something to this broader discourse, or I'm, I want to make people feel something with my music or whatever it is, all of which is great. But I think the actual truth is that at the end of the day, it's like, no, this is for us. Obviously, we're doing this for us, like, because this means something to us and we get something out of it. And so this is a long-winded way of saying, like, yes, I definitely get a lot out of these, but I started doing the podcast mainly because I'm a big podcast listener myself. And I was hearing people in other disciplines, primarily comedians, but also, other like visual artists or actors or anything, having conversations like the one that we're having. And I kind of just wondered why no one was doing it for our world. Just because, I don't know, I like talking to people about this kind of stuff. And we all know so many interesting characters, people with crazy stories or wild ideas or, hilarious people, crazy people. And so, yeah, it just in a way, I was like, just seems like somebody should I would like to hear these. That's really why I started doing it. I was like, this is something I'd like to hear. And if no one else is going to do it, I guess I'll do it. I didn't really feel like I was going to be good at it or that it was something I should be doing particularly. But I don't know, man. I've been doing it for like 6 years now, and I still don't really feel like I'm amazing at it. But I think it's kind of what you were talking about with the imposter thing of just like, at this point, I'm confident. I go back and listen. I'm like, oh, that's good. So I'm like, all right, well, there must be something going on here, even if I don't feel it at the time,
Do you think there's people who don't feel like imposters?
No. Honestly, no, I don't think so. I think there's people who are very good at sort of the mindfulness stuff that you're talking about, and people who are very good or at the affirmations stuff to bring it all the way home, who can sort of get themselves out of that imposter place often. But I think anyone who tells you that they never feel like that those are probably the most insecure people,
Yeah. I think it's helpful if I heard someone else like me kind of talking about my imposter syndrome. I think that'd be very helpful for me personally if I heard someone else. And it doesn't even have to be in the same field.
Right.
Just someone who's doing something cool. I think it'd be just nice. You just feel, it feels more relatable.
Oh, 100%.
Like we're all on this journey. Like no one has it figured out. We're all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. And I love getting the behind the scenes stuff too. Like one thing I noticed, and I think you'll relate to this, is like when I would listen to comedians' podcasts, that kind of thing. It's like I almost liked the podcast, hearing them talk about their life and how they were trying to do shit in their careers. I like that more than the product they were making. Like I liked it more than their comedy in a weird way, which I don't know. I feel like for you guys too, like with the building the instruments and doing it all yourselves, like there's something to me that makes the world and the product, whether it's something you're making or something you're consuming, like it's so much more meaningful when I kind of know where it's coming from and the person who made it and what they were worrying about when they did it, that kind of thing. But I honestly, man, it's half the reason I do this is because, I don't know if otherwise we would have sat down and talked for an hour today. And that was really nice. Like, I love this kind of shit, man. It's great to reconnect, and it's fucking good to see you guys. Honestly, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's great. It's like, it's good to talk through. It's like almost like, why do we have therapists? I mean, I don't have a therapist, so maybe this is why this is kind of cool. Because I learned things about myself through just talking about our journey and our path. Because I think we get very caught up in what we're doing and don't spend any time on reflecting on how we got here.
Yeah, I feel you, man.
The process is interesting.
100% the process is interesting. Well, no charge for this session. The first one's free. But
Sick.
I don't know. Did I answer your question? The original question about why I'm doing this? I'm not even sure if I did.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like it's clear in your mind why you do it? Because a lot of times it's not clear in my mind why I do things.
I think it cycles. It comes in and out of focus. Like, I would say, if I'm being completely honest, like the last few months, I've been in a cycle of just like, I'm doing this because this is what I do. And I'm not thinking about it that much. And then I'll have other times or certain conversations I have with people. And there were definitely moments today too, talking to you guys, where I'm like, oh, somebody just said something that is going to like change my brain in a permanent way, or like change the way I approach something or think about something. And I mean, yeah, those moments are super valuable. I love that. Yeah, man. I don't know. I don't always know either, but it's at the end of the day, you know what it is? You look back on the thing, whatever it is, the thing you made, the thing you've been doing. And I still find value in it. I'm like, cool. This is great. Like, look at all this shit I made. That's amazing. You know, it's like stuff that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So yeah, there's definitely some like reflection and value added after the fact too. You know, it's like you said, you don't always stop to look around, but then when you can have those moments to step outside and look at it, I don't know. I think that kind of makes it all worthwhile. Do you feel that way about what you do?
Yeah. Michael, do you know why you do what you do? Or like another existential question? Because like, I feel like, okay, all of us, you included, Willy, like we put in a lot of work for all this. And it just goes back to my like addiction. I'm just like addicted to this. You know, I love this. And I guess that's why I do it. There's not like a huge underlying reason to that. And is that just how most people live their lives, you know?
I think it's all about this like journey. And once you're caught up in it, you're just on the journey and you don't stop. It's part of it for me. Like from the beginning, you just like started this thing and it just keeps going and doesn't stop. Yeah, I don't know. It's like
it just keeps going.
Keeps going. You don't want to. You don't. Yes.
Well, okay. So I think there's a positive and a negative there, right? Because there is something. It's fun and it's exciting because you can always be like, "Oh, what's over the next hill?" And then you get over that, and you're like, "Oh, there's another hill." And you know, it's like there's always more to dig in and to do and to learn, discover, which is super positive. In full honesty, I have this thought sometimes, and maybe this is definitely a negative, but I think there's also a fear for me of if I stop, like this is my identity is wrapped up in this. So like, can I separate me as a person from me as a DJ, as a musician, as a podcaster? Sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's all wrapped up. And so I think subconsciously, sometimes there's a fear of like, well, if I stop, like, who am I? And like, am I anything? You know what I mean? And I think that it's a driving force.
That might be a lot of it. I think it's like
that's huge.
Yeah, that is
I think a lot of people have that fear.
I think so.
Like on a subconscious level, because it's your whole identity, like you're saying, like ours included. Like if I wanted to just go like open a fruit stand in Hawaii, like my whole identity is like thrown out the window to do that.
Yeah. And there's value in it, right? Where it's like, am I worth anything if I stop doing all this shit? Like, and of course the reality is, of course you are, and of course I am, and we all are. But it's a scary thing to just be like, oh, can I like? I guess I'm just out here, you know, being a human. Yeah, there's like not much else going on. That's a very scary thought.
That is super scary. Yeah. Especially someone who spend your whole life doing, you know, working on one thing,
right?
Achieving to one thing.
Right. Yeah. Like the plan B looks very far away at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
But again, I don't think any of this is good or bad necessarily. Like I think that energy, that fear, it's what we were saying earlier, that can be channeled into a lot of productive things. But at the same time, yeah, you gotta, I think especially as you get older, you gotta start, you know, sort of just finding value in little things liking yourself as a person regardless of external validation, all this shit that we all know we're supposed to do. But at a certain point, you actually have to start working on it, you know?
Yeah.
Which I don't know. It sounds like you guys are doing that to a certain extent. Like you made a whole album about, you know, feeling good about yourself or telling yourself it's okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's good. You're on the path at least.
There's just so much to experience in life, right? I feel like most people spend their life on kind of a very narrow path. I mean, obviously, our narrow path has been absolutely amazing. Like life has been incredible, but still a narrow path. Like there's still so many other things to try and do in life. And if I think about the novelty of the experience, like in the very beginning, like my first DJ set at Michael's party, where I just rolled in with this vinyl and people are like bumping to the decks and like scratching, the music stopping. Man, that party was so much fun. Like it wasn't like a big party by any means. Like, you know, we play festivals and stuff now, but there's something to be said about the novelty of a new experience. Maybe sometimes it's okay to let go of something you worked your whole life on just to try something else in life.
I mean, 100%. You have to, I would say, I would go harder on that idea. It's like you almost have to know when it's time to let go, because absolutely you can cling to something too long, either because it's comfortable or because it, you know, whatever's next is scary and you don't want to deal with that. But, you know, yeah, you gotta, life is all about change. Change is the only constant in life, right? So it's like, I don't know. Not, and this doesn't, like for anybody listening to this, we're not saying like go quit your job or go like throw everything out the window, but there's value in knowing when it's time to move on, or even when it would be beneficial to put yourself in an uncomfortable place again, you know?
True. Yeah. Because I feel like we feel much more comfortable in this realm of music because we've been doing this for so long. But I feel like almost like the lack of fear to walk up on a stage and go DJ, like that's what you're missing out on by you know, being proficient in one area. You know, like just the scariness of doing something. Like it's kind of, maybe that's why, you know, our tours are always changing. We're like, this is why our music is always changing, because if you literally just did, you know, one form of style, genre of music your whole life, then you're not getting that novelty experience. That's why we dabbled in a little techno, you know, right? Because it's like offered a challenge for us.
What would it be? All right, this is kind of a shitty interview question, but it just, is there a thing that you would like to do but feel like you can't? Like what would be like the weird thing? It's almost like if you weren't a DJ, what would you be? That kind of shitty question. but legitimately, like, is there something in life, maybe something you have no business doing or no expertise, that you're just like, it'd be cool to do that?
I mean, I think about sometimes like maybe more like this is almost like a retirement type thing, like what I do after music type thing.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, if I could just like move to Bali and open up like a coffee shop.
Sounds amazing.
I don't know if that's practical at all.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. You could totally do that.
I mean, you noticed like when 2020 hit, a lot of DJs just did not make music in that year.
Yeah.
They all like went to go do something else, because I feel like our lives got way too consumed with this whole life. And everyone did something weird. Like Michael was building furniture. I know like Griffin and Kygo just started becoming obsessed with golf.
Right.
I was obsessed with like the stock markets and trading. It like actually forced us to like, actually it gave us like every DJ like a window of opportunity to be like, if you want to do something right now, you can. And everyone did. It's kind of like the question you're posing right now, except we feel like we shouldn't, we can't, you know, our whole career is tied to this. So we don't, unless like there's a pandemic that stops everything.
It's true. I mean, I always say, people who listen to this podcast hear me say this all the time. DJs need hobbies. Everybody, like all of us who do this kind of like super focused super time and labor intensive thing, you have to have something outside of it. And I mean, for you guys, I think you both have in one way or another had that all along to a certain extent with like the different art stuff, or maybe, you know, now some of the like getting back into trading or other interests like that. But, you know, so you got to have something. You got to have something you do that like isn't related to this shit, that just works your brain in a different way. I don't know, man. I worry about people who are so laser focused that there's nothing else. Cause I'm just like, that can't last long term. It's just not, can't be healthy. Even I know you love it, but it can't be healthy long term.
It's also crazy to see like how things like switched around. Like I think for most people, like music starts as the hobby, right? And then it becomes your full-time job. And then maybe some of those things like furniture building or like art for me, which were kind of like what I was doing like more full-time, then becomes like a hobby for you because you can only have like so much time to do that stuff.
Right.
Like even maybe this is a better example of trading, you know, where like got back, you know, that was like full-time job when I met him. And then during the pandemic, he's like, I want to like get back into this for a little bit.
I feel like I recognize there are a lot of things that I could easily just get obsessed and addicted with. Like I started surfing that summer in 2020. And I just looked at it as like, wow, I could literally dedicate every hour of my day to this craft and I would love it. But then I was just like, well, what does it do for my life? So that's why I went back to music. So it's kind of like one of those things like, yes, we would take up other things. There's a lot of things we would like want to pursue. But a lot of times we're like, well, I've already, you know, have this thing. I've put so much work into it and it's like a career. All these other things are not. So I feel like, yes, in the sense, like we would want to try other avenues, but we don't a lot of times because of kind of some of these decisions.
Well, of course, and part of like being an adult and growing up and having a long career, of course, is learning how to prioritize and how to, you know, how to find what's really important and focus on it and how to not get too distracted by stuff that isn't. That's all very important. Like all of what you're talking about, I think is good in terms of like, let's be realistic about, you know, how I want to live this life and what makes me happy and, you know, all that sort of thing. Like, I mean, overall, like, are you pretty happy in general with like the way your life is? Because I think as long as you can say that, then I don't think you have to feel so bad about the other shit, you know?
Yeah, you just have to be happy with what you're doing, what you have at the time. It's like another mindset thing. A lot of musicians do get burned out. You see it all the time. It's almost another cycle. I see it. Like,
yeah,
there's almost like an arc from someone's career. They start out, they go hard, they party like crazy. Then they end up in some weird dark place. They go completely sober or they disappear for like a year or two or three. It happens a lot. It's like another cycle. It's just, and yeah, I feel like every musician and artist has to maybe be aware of that going into it.
For sure. I mean, you were saying earlier that you guys got burnt out at a certain point and you were going a little hard. What adjustments did you make at that point? Like, are you just like being a bit more selective about touring and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. And also being more intentional about the whole experience. I'd say my biggest regret from that time period was not being present enough and enjoying all the incredible things we were doing, all the festivals we were playing, the friends we were with and making. And so now I just try to take my time with things. Before I would just be more focused about what we need to do, what kind of work we need to do, like what do we need for our social media, like what's our next obligation. So a lot of that's kind of taken a back seat to more just experience and be present more.
Michael, anything for you as far as adjustments?
You know, I mean, coming back into touring, it was to not burn out, I think, doing tours that you're genuinely enjoying, like the atmosphere of and the music you're playing, and not taking those gigs where it's just like, oh, this feels like work. Making sure that it feels like something you want to be at, a party that you would want to attend as a person. Part of it.
What kind of, like just weird bills, like getting booked on like festivals where you're like, why are we here? That kind of thing.
Yeah, just being more intentional about the shows, that like the branding for the show, what the show means to us, how it's coming across to people. It's something we've always been pretty like aware of when we're branding our shows and like what we want it to be, but just making sure that it's something that reflects us.
Yeah, being intentional, I think, is it's another one of those things where you're like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to be intentional, but unless you really think about it all the time when you're making all those choices, it doesn't happen,
Yeah, you can see other DJs. You can observe sometimes. You can tell when they're not present. It's more, especially like the original EDM DJs. They've been doing it so long. It just looks like they're just going up there, like, clocking in for work and they're just leaving.
Yeah.
And I think that is very eye-opening for me to make sure I don't like ever end up in that place.
It's true, man. You know who isn't like that, weirdly, or at least I don't think he is every time I see Tiesto, like a video of Tiesto playing, every single time he looks so stoked. Like
that's great.
Great.
I've never even met him, never talked to him, but just every time I see him, he's just genuinely stoked. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that at this point, but it's amazing.
This is why he's still here.
It's true.
It's crazy that he has like reinvented himself over and over musically, and I think he takes, like what his original music was to what it is now. He hasn't done the same thing for all those years. Maybe that's part of it. Is like he's expanded his brand and his musical like styles, and the sets he plays are very different over the years. It's not like I've been playing the same music for 30 years now type thing.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah, he's not playing his hits from the 90s. Like if you had to do that for 30 years, you would want to probably shoot yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I've talked to people about that, like the danger of having a hit, like a hit. Yeah. It's in some ways, man, that can be a scary thing where you're just like, fuck, I got to do this forever now. Like it gets to that point. It's, I guess, just like everything else we're talking about. There's like, you kind of just have to take the negative part of it and be like, well, how can I work with this? What could I do from here? Because in the end, like that's the other thing I think we haven't said that we all understand is like, all of this whole discussion is like, we're so lucky to be doing this shit. And, it's like, there's absolutely a certain level of privilege where it's like, yeah, not everyone is able to even try these weird ideas and to have this time to fail and try again and all that. So of course there's like a baseline for me of gratitude about all of it, where I'm like, no matter how shitty I feel on a given day about something, it's just like, well, would I pick an alternative like life path? No, I wouldn't. So, it's like there is a baseline of gratitude with all this that on my better days, I try to remind myself about, Yeah,
that says a lot, because if you ask most people, would you take another path in life? I think a lot of people would say, yeah.
You think so? Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are probably frustrated with their careers and whatnot, life. I don't know. Maybe it's just a mindset thing.
I think, yeah.
Just change.
Well, and like we were saying, man, you can turn it around anytime. All of us can quit music today. And in fact, that's what I brought you here to do. The end of this podcast is all of us quitting and moving on, coffee shop, trading, and I'll figure something else out. But
surfer. I'm going to be a surfer.
Surfer. There you go. Beautiful. Yeah, that's it. So this is the end of our careers. Thank you guys for coming.
Next time you're in Bali, you can visit my coffee shop.
Oh, yeah. Let's make sure. I'll put the link to your coffee shop in the description there. Yeah.
So actually, your podcast is like secretly funded by the government. Have more DJs quit their jobs and have less people raving.
All right. Well, let's edit that part out and move on. I wish I was funded by the guy. I wish I was funded by anyone. That'd be great. Well, shit, dude. I want to let you guys go, man. This is amazing. But it's really good to see you guys, man. I hope we run into each other somewhere IRL soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having us. This is great.
Yeah, dude. Anytime. Come back.
I hope your listeners can learn something from it.
Oh, for sure, man. No, this was great. This is not all episodes are this much fun. This was great.
Take care, man.
All right.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.